The year was 1998, a liminal era in the march of progress, perched precariously between a past that demanded secrecy and a future promising freedom for people like me. It was a time when the LGBTQ community was navigating profound societal shifts. The devastation of the AIDS epidemic had left scars, but had also galvanized activism and awareness, forcing a dialogue about rights and acceptance. Meanwhile, visibility in media and politics began to grow, albeit slowly, offering glimpses of the equality yet to come. This juxtaposition of hope and lingering prejudice made the era uniquely charged with both promise and peril for people like me. I was a young gay man in my early 20s navigating life in a Midwestern city where the world was not yet entirely safe, but it was no longer suffocating either. The internet had begun to reshape how people met, communicated, and explored their identities. For gay men, the digital frontier was revolutionary, a place where we could exist without fear of immediate judgment, even if we had to tread carefully. Chat rooms, message boards, and emails became our lifelines, digital sanctuaries where we could share our fears, celebrate small victories, and find solace in the company of others who understood our struggles. These platforms were more than just communication tools. They fostered a sense of community and support that felt almost revolutionary in an era when such connections were otherwise hard to come by. Through these platforms, I met friends, lovers, and fleeting connections. It was a time of excitement, but also one fraught with risks we didn't fully understand yet. The anonymity of the internet was a double-edged sword, granting safety while concealing threats in equal measure. I should have been more cautious. One day, I received an email from an unknown sender. Its tone was ominous, its message vague. I'm not gay, but I don't agree with what that slim guy 65 is doing. My friend met him, and you really hurt him. Be careful if you were thinking of meeting him. Be careful if you were thinking of meeting him. No specifics, no follow-up response when I replied seeking clarity. Just that vague, cryptic warning. At the time, I shrugged it off. Anonymous warnings from strangers weren't uncommon. And there was always the possibility of an ex-lover's vendetta or simple trolling. I didn't give it much weight. Weeks later, I found myself fishing for company online on a rare weekday off. An email popped up, a reply to a post ID made. It was from Slim Guy 65. His message was friendly, almost boring, and he suggested meeting at his place. The simplicity of his tone belied any cause for concern, and I found myself rationalizing that meeting someone in our area on a busy street couldn't possibly be unsafe. Perhaps I was simply craving connection or dismissing the nagging warnings because I didn't want to live in constant fear. Either way, curiosity and perhaps a touch of defiance drove my decision. His address was on a busy street in a densely packed residential neighborhood. It seemed safe enough. I barely remembered the earlier warning as I typed out my response. When I pulled up to the address, the house appeared innocuous. A duplex among rows of identical buildings. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the trees, casting comforting shadows over the well-maintained street. Children's laughter echoed faintly from nearby yards. Everything about it felt ordinary. The man who opened the door was unremarkable. He was in his mid-40s, slim with a mousy demeanor. His voice was soft, almost hesitant, and his demeanor unassuming. If you saw him in passing, you'd think he was an accountant or a schoolteacher. Still, something felt off. But I told myself I was overthinking. I stepped inside. The kitchen was pristine, but oddly barren, with no sign of recent use, no clutter, not even a table or chairs. My stomach twisted as I realized how unnervingly sterile it felt, like a space prepared for something other than everyday living. It struck me that the absence of even the most basic signs of habitation made the room feel more like a stage set than a home. It didn't feel like someone lived here. The air smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals, masking something I couldn't quite place. Beyond the kitchen, I glimpsed the living room dominated by a large stainless steel table. It gleamed in the sunlight filtering through vertical blinds. My first thought was that it resembled a surgical table, cold, clinical, and completely out of place in what was supposed to be a home. "This isn't where I live," he said quickly, as if anticipating my unspoken question. "A friend used to run a doctor's office here. I maintain the place for him now. It's private, though. We won't be disturbed." He shut the door behind me and locked it with a keyed deadbolt. I froze. Why would he lock the door like that? When I asked, he gave a weak smile, just, "So no one barges in." His voice faltered, his eyes darting nervously. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I stayed rooted in place, curiosity battling with growing unease. "Unlock the door," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The words felt like lead in my throat. His face paled, and his hands trembled as he fumbled with the key. He unlocked the deadbolt, but then twisted the knob lock. "There. It's still private, but you can leave if you want." He placed the keys on the counter, a gesture meant to reassure me, but it didn't. I was acutely aware of how he positioned himself between me and the door. "Come on," he said. His voice strained. He gestured toward the living room. Against my better judgment, I followed, each step heavy with the sense that I was walking into a trap. The stainless steel table dominated the room. It had a recessed channel running along its edges, the kind designed to catch liquids. Cabinets lined the walls, their doors slightly ajar, revealing medical tools I couldn't identify. The blinds were tightly shut, casting the room in dim artificial light. "This used to be the exam room," he explained, his voice cracking. "Come on, let's go down the hall." The hallway was narrow, with doors on either side. One was closed, the other open to reveal a small, spotless bathroom. At the end of the hall, another door stood ajar, revealing a room paneled in dark wood. I hesitated. Something about that room felt wrong, but he was already gesturing for me to step inside. The room was bare except for a single plastic chair in the center, and a rotary phone on the floor against the wall. The wood paneling looked new, and I realized with a jolt that it covered what should have been windows. There was no way to see in or out of this room. Worse, the door had a keyed lock on the outside. I turned to find him watching me, his expression unreadable. His nervousness had vanished, replaced by something colder, more calculating. My heart pounded as adrenaline surged through my veins. This was no longer about curiosity or even unease. This was survival. "What's this room for?" I asked, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my throat. "It's private," he replied vaguely, taking a step closer. "No one can hear anything from here." I backed out of the doorway, keeping my eyes locked on him. "I think I'm going to head out. Thanks for showing me around." His smile faltered, and for a moment, he looked like he might try to stop me. But then his eyes flicked to the door, to the keys on the counter, and finally back to me. He knew I was on edge, and maybe he wasn't ready for someone who wasn't easy prey. "Sure," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Let me walk you out." I didn't wait. I strode to the kitchen, grabbed the keys, and unlocked the door myself. As I stepped outside, the weight of the afternoon sun hit me like a lifeline. My car was only a few feet away, but it felt like miles. I got in, locked the doors, and sped away without looking back. For days, I replayed the encounter in my mind, piecing together the strange details and questioning the choices that led me there. The experience left me more wary, more attuned to the subtle red flags I might have overlooked before. It wasn't just the sterile environment or the locked doors. It was the calculated way he tried to manipulate my perception of safety. In the weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting on how easily vulnerability can be exploited and how vital it is to trust one's instincts. It was a lesson in survival I would carry with me for the rest of my life. The surgical table, the windowless room, the locks. None of it made sense unless I considered the worst. What did he plan to do if I'd let my guard down? And who was the anonymous emailer who had tried to warn me? I'll never know for sure, but one thing is certain. I came terrifyingly close to something unspeakable that day. And even now, decades later, the memory sends a chill down my spine.